The first is with regard to your concerns, the concerns of the World Bank in general. I understand you are looking at this, you are looking forward to this conference as something which can help start the dialogue between finance ministers and education minister. My question is, what do you really have that make you be so confident that in organizing this type of meeting, you can actually make people believe and join your ideas of starting dialogue? And linked to this question, you have just said...
Can I answer the first one so that we can keep the trend well? I think if we needed an example of how this kind of a forum can be helpful, it is what the minister from Uganda said, the Minister of Finance of Uganda. You heard him. He said it, that he's going away thinking about a lot of things that he looked at differently on the basis of this, and that when he interacts with the Ministry of Education following this conference, that there are a couple of things that he's going to be looking at differently. That's important. Now, if in this conference that we've had, about, say, 20–25% of the ministers of finance that came here now understand how important education is for their overall broad economic growth strategy. This is the first conference. That's good. We have to sustain it until it becomes a matter of habit that a minister of finance doesn't isolate education as though it's something, it's just a social thing. And so we just give you the money and you spend, that's your business. No, he actually says, what can I do for education and what can education do for the economy? So that kind of way of thinking, that building that sense of symbiotic, creativity between education and managing the economy is what we have started off with this interaction. And I think we will continue and sustain it. Second.
Yeah, the second is still linked to the same issue. I understand as well that at the beginning, you were demanding that countries sending their delegates should only be at the level of ministers, that you won't accept substitutes like vice ministers or directors. How successful were you with that demand, and why was it being made that demand?
Well, this was supposed to be a gathering of the leaders in finance and in education. So naturally, the leaders in any Ministry of Finance or Education is the Minister of Finance and the Minister of State for Finance or Minister of State for Education. So that was fine by us. The most important thing is to have that critical leadership being at this event. And we do have a good turnout. I don't think it's... I don't understand, the question, basically. I'm sort of wondering what does my answer to that question help advance? I'm trying to understand what you're puzzled about with that question so that I can understand why it's important a question. Because what we have there are some 35 ministers from across the continent, and that's a good turnout of people to discuss an important issue in advancing education. So maybe I'm the one not understanding what, if you explain to me what it is, yes.
What I'm saying is that normally when it comes to this kind of meetings, governments at times are afraid to, instead of sending the minister to appoint, to delegate a vice minister.
There are vice ministers.
So my question is why precisely the World Bank was demanding that countries should only send their ministers and not substitutes?
Why do you want a substitute if you can have the person who makes the decision concerning an important issue? I still am lost as to your question, really. And you're trying to make it seem as if the World Bank commanded that's where your story is going. But, that's totally unnecessary. The real issue here is that you needed decision makers for education, and you needed decision makers in the Ministry of Finance to discuss a strategic issue. Now, if you care about education, instead of having the ministers, you want their substitutes? Would that be better for you? I'm asking. I can be the journalist and ask you. You think you're the only one who can be a journalist? Look at this man. Me too, I'm a journalist.
Somebody gave her the title after her facilitation.
Okay. Oh, somebody said what?
I think the person who met you and said, you could be a good TV.
Okay, your third question. I have harassed you, right? You got the answer you wanted. Yes. It's about decision makers. If you have the substitutes, they would only be. They can't state. They can't even. The level of political leadership that you need to advance this would be different from when you have the people who ultimately make the decisions in the two ministries talking and understanding that how they have to work together. You're trying to build them into significant allies for the promotion of education as an important economic activity. So you need them at that level. And in cases where we have some where the vice ministers came, they are equal leaders in education, they are equal leaders in finance, so that's very good. For cases where, and there are very few cases where director level came, they would report. It's not going to, of course, be as great as when the minister actually came and saw a fellow minister from Singapore who had the experience of being a minister of education and being a minister of finance, speaking to them about these issues. It's a different kind of, many of the ministers that I've seen since that morning presentation have said, that presentation by the minister was just so mind-blowing. Yes. Now, you think they are going back thinking exactly the same way? I'm sure they're going to be thinking, what are the 2 or 3 things I can take from what I heard that I can do? Because they are the ones that can make it happen. Okay?
Yes. The third question is, what is your assessment about the relation between quality and quantity in education?
Yeah. The next important thing for the continent, especially now that we've seen this universal basic education be really attainable. Since 2005, when was it 2005 or 2000? Dakar 2000, right? 2000. It was 2000 that we did the Education for All fast-track initiative. Since then, you can imagine the significant progress that has been made in pushing the agenda for universal basic education. But that has been access objective realized. Quality is a totally different ballgame. Because when you look at, and that's where the question you asked about contract teachers and things like that, when you look at the issue of adequacy of teachers, competency of teachers, nations are trying to find creative ways to deal with that. In the process of finding ways to deal with the issue of teacher and teacher availability and teacher quality, quality sometimes ends up suffering. A lot. In fact, a lot. In some places, very much so. So the next set of intervention is going to really be, how do we begin to provide solutions for the teaching profession that would enable the same access that we have seen, so that the quantity that we have seen will also result in quantity plus quality, and not quantity minus quality, So investment in teacher-related professionalization activities, standardization activities, giving them the kind of incentives, and actually reforming the teaching profession. Because part of the issue in teaching is that sometimes you have so many teachers, but with little number of them as high grade as possible, when indeed you could have little number of teachers with great competency and use the deployment of open access and technology as ways of still getting the kind of reach of teachers to students that you need to attain. So it's going to be an important issue. Issues in curriculum and instruction are important for quality. When you have outdated curriculum at any level in education, it doesn't matter how many people go. You have many people who have been given poor curriculum, so they are not quality. So ensuring that curricular review is a continuous thing to update the curricula, to ensure that the curricula at the different levels of education are made relevant to the new imperatives in the society and in the economy, both in the national economy as well as the global economy, because it's a competitive world. Right now, the child graduating from Burkina is not competing with his or her fellow Burkinabe compatriot. His or her competition is the person graduating from Bangladesh. So we have to begin to think a little differently about the way we're looking at curriculum issues. And then instructional, access to instructional materials. So what does ICT do for the child in today's Africa? The reality that I always expressed when I was a Minister of Education is that, a child sitting in very rural Senegal, but with access to the internet, you've just put them on the same pedestal as the child in the White House with access to the internet. They just meet at that gateway and they are the same. When they meet on the Facebook or any of the social networking thing, they are the same. So the child's access to knowledge has gone beyond the boundary of Senegal. So how do we use those kinds of tools for upgrading and updating the kind of quality of outcomes we can get out of the African child? And then the quality issue also has to do with physical infrastructure. When I was minister, one of the times that I cried as a public servant, as a public official, was when we took stock of the state of the public schools across the nation, and you saw some children under the tree in 2000 plus. In this modern millennium in Africa, you still have children who do not have classrooms. They study under shades. Now, that's an element in quality that's important to focus on. But where are the resources to make all of this happen? We have to be creative. We really, really have to be creative. We have to be innovative in finding solutions. We have to be open-minded in saying government alone cannot do it, and that it's going to take the community, it's going to take private sector, it's going to take family, and then it's going to take government leading the way for us to be able to adequately finance education. Does that answer your question?